Hey, beautiful tribe, Shia here in Austin, and thought I would share another one of my experiences since this is ends up being a great starting point of certain discussions around Tantra and sexuality. Um, I was recently in a play party where we were sharing our fantasies. And so the one that came to mind was like a fantasy of like being stranded on a desert island with the best lover from each culture, man, like the ultimate man from each culture, the best of what they had to offer. And it appears as though I am living that to some degree. Not stranded on an island, because I've already done that, been there, done that, where there was not enough of a array of men to choose from. It was a little bit tight of a pool. Excuse me. But now that I'm in Austin, there's a lot more men, and different cultures too, honestly, that I'm meeting. Woo, okay. And I had a recent experience that I thought was worth documenting because I'm finding this all quite fascinating myself. So I met an amazing Indian man from India, and it was such a joy. It was such a treat because a lot of times Indian men have been one of my least favorite experiences in giving tantra sessions to, because I was noticing a pattern where they seemed kind of like they get overexcited, like can be a little bit grabby, but mostly like their boundaries just seem to be all over the place. Like they didn't understand boundaries very well and how to be with a woman, and kind of almost like objectifying a bit too. Anyway, I wasn't enjoying that very much. And so this was a really nice experience for me to have instead. And this man is quite a bit younger than I am, more than 2 decades younger than me, because I am in my early 50s and just turned this month, actually, had my birthday, whereas he just turned 30. So at this point, it's like 23 different years difference, and yet not noticing that being an issue whatsoever. I notice I'm not really looking at ages anymore. Now that I'm at this stage, it just seems like I'm meeting guys who are 20s, 30s, 40s most of the time, actually. So I just don't really even, it doesn't even cross my mind so much, which is awesome. And because really we're a soul, and I'm an old soul, and it's all about the connection and the soul. We just happen to be a certain age in our physical bodies this time around in this lifetime, at any rate. So I'm thinking that he is the same exact rigging that I am in the erotic blueprint system, which is an energetic, sensual, more so than the others. Although I was equally kind of all of them, but slightly more in those two categories. And I would say that's the same for him too. So it was kind of interesting for me to experience a man who has that same blueprint as me. And I think that's partly why the connection was so good, because when you're an energetic, you can be highly sensitive to energy, and it allows you to kind of almost enjoy it a lot more, because you're like enjoying every second, every minute, every morsel of what's happening, as opposed to maybe the other end of the spectrum is someone who needs so much more stimulation just to get that same kind of high, I guess. and is always having to take it further to get there. So this was the opposite of that. And it was really delightful to be like both of us be so sensitive that we could just feel everything. Every little move, every little thing was amazing. And it allowed us to really slow everything down so much. And he came in as a client, and I'm actually remembering that, part of what I do sometimes is I teach men how to pleasure women better. And he spent like 45 minutes. It was so amazing. And I guess that doesn't really pertain to this particular talk, but I'm remembering that. Very impressive. Because he's so in the moment, and he was so sensual and laid back, and he knew how to keep me on the edge, right on the edge for a really long time, because he's not in a hurry. He's just enjoying it, and so am I. And anyway, he definitely represents, he's a beautiful representation of his culture. And yes, he has had to stand up to his culture, and around his profession and everything, because he's not taking the typical route that a lot of Indian families want their kids to take, which is to be a lawyer or doctor or whatever. He's just not rigged that way, and he is more into like health and fitness and breath work and tantra and all that. So anyway, it was just a delightful experience. He was really fun. And then we actually ended up hanging out afterwards because we had such a good connection. And we ended up kissing, and I was like, wow, and you're an amazing kisser too, because that's not something I do in my sessions. And he also was, tall and built well, and, worked out and all that. And he had the face of Krishna, I told him, that kind of ideal Indian face that was fascinating. So that was really amazing. And I think a lot of times when a man is that sensitive and that energetic, he can be misunderstood quite a bit, because he's not rushing, he's not in a hurry, he could feel everything. So I actually had to slow things down quite a bit for him when we were practicing the breathing and everything, because he could end up building the energy too fast because he's so fine-tuned. And so I just slowed it all down and just did my edging with him, where I was just slowing it down way more than I normally need to. And that was actually delightful for me, because I could tell he was just feeling every stroke, every little thing. And that's nice. It's like a pure, innocent place to be, instead of having to overdo it or create so much friction and that kind of thing. So anyway, it was just a really sweet experience. And then I was able to introduce him to his first play party ever, which was eye-opening, because you learn a lot at those, like how to ask for what you want and how to negotiate an experience. Like someone might propose something, and then you say, well, I like this part about that, and I was wondering, what do you think about it if we added this part? And you kind of work with where you both feel comfortable at that point in time. And that takes some verbal skills and being in touch with yourself, some emotional intelligence, and yeah. And then the next day we ended up spending it in nature and by the water, and he was just very very much a gentleman. So it was a beautiful experience, and I just wanted to share that because it was so unusual. And I really appreciated having that beautiful experience with an Indian man, because a lot of times I have found them to be kind of hyper and they're talking too fast and kind of like just not very skilled with women was just my experience in the past. And I'm finding that in Austin, someone actually came in before him that was Indian as well. And so both of them are good examples of they were, more normal that way. They were just more present and easier to be with. And so anyway, I'm glad to be able to report that.